Misbah Khan. We've been joined by Fazal Wahid. He is focusing on addiction psychology and he is also running a rehabilitation center for addiction called Lifeline. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we're going to start with you, Fazal, because you have the statistics. So let's talk about what is the situation regarding addiction within Pakistan statistically.
According to the UNODC, they conducted a survey and the statistics are very alarming. Almost 10 million people in Pakistan, they're using drugs, and 60 to 70% out of them are youth, young people like below 30. And the most common drug among those drugs is cannabis. Like 5 million people are using cannabis in Pakistan. Nearly 3 million people are using opiates or opiate morphine derivatives. And then there are other drugs also, like the third largest drug that is used in Pakistan is sedative tranquilizers, mostly by the female segment.
Okay, so that paints a very bleak picture of what's happening within Pakistan. But now there is there always, you know, we try to find those silver linings because life is already so tough. So now, Misbah, you know, you're a psychotherapist. You've been working with in Pakistan, and last time, you know, we found out all about that. But now, when you're seeing, you know, when you're having your patients or clients come in, what are you seeing are the reasons, the core reasons, or excuses, or
the root causes.
The root causes.
Yeah, the root causes are, there's various root causes. There is no, just like the variables within the clients, there's variable root causes. But I think the family composition breakdown, there's lack of support, there's lack of understanding, there's a lot of peer pressure. So there's more of external pressures than internal support. So that's where the breakdown, the conflict is happening. And as we all know, we are humans and we need to have some peace and tranquility in our lives, so we seek out that relief from substance abuse. So that's what most of my clients come with.
Okay, so then first I want to ask you then, why is it that, you know, in the 21st century, you know, when you don't have that support network, maybe within the family or within the society, why are we still running towards substances, or, you know, why are we still trying to find that escape through that?
All right, we need to understand the basic difference, like the difference between the reasons of using drugs and the reasons of addiction. They are different, okay? Reasons of using drugs could be peer pressure, like 50% of the people who use drugs for the first time are because of peer pressure. 16% are because of they process some loss or stress. 13% they do it for enjoyment, and some 10% for prescription and various reasons. So these are the reasons why people use drugs, okay? Like, for example, if you use sugar, you don't use sugar with an intent to become a diabetic later.
That's true.
Similarly, when you use drugs, you don't use drugs for the first time with an intention to become an addict to it.
Very good point.
But that is, you know, a deficiency in our genes. We are genetically predisposed towards it. So once we start using it, we become addicted to it. So reasons for addictions are different than the reasons for using drugs for the first time.
That's very, like, you know, I'm glad you've put it like that, because that was a very important distinction to make as well. Now, as we mentioned before we were briefing, and this is the problem, like with such an interesting conversation, you end up briefing too much before the show and then you forget what you need to ask on air. But now, we talked about during the briefing about the difference between addiction and habits. Because that kind of goes hand in hand, because it's so hard to break a habit. And if we're already genetically predisposed to being addicted to things, what's happening, and how do we figure out if we're predisposed to being addicts?
I mean, there's various tests and stuff, but I believe that to break the cycle, we have to understand, as you quite rightly just asked before, that to break the cycle, we have to understand where the root cause is. And once we know where the root cause is, then we can break the cycle. What you're asking is, how do we know if we're predisposed to, say, some people predisposed to diabetes, some people are predisposed to cancer. It's not about knowing what we're predisposed to, it's about preventing, it's about protecting ourselves from this exposure, like what Fazal just said. We don't consume sugar with an intention to become diabetic. Sorry, I think it's about protecting ourselves.
Right.
It's about knowing, having the awareness, having the knowledge of our own limitations and our own. I think it's more about the psychological patterns we also develop. So imagine if a person is known to have addictive behaviors in other parts of life. So if they binge on box sets, or if they are binging on fast food, so that is something that will probably cause them to have an addiction to a substance also.
Okay.
So it's more about self-awareness and understanding how we.
Okay, so then I want to ask Fazal, because you mentioned that about predicting within your kids, like for parents, it's something, the family role is very important, and we will talk about, like, you can bring in the family role into this as well, but how can, because that's where it starts from, like you said, we're seeing an increase in the youth and the youngsters going to drug use. So how can parents predict that their kids are susceptible to these dangers, or how can one figure this stuff out themselves? So there's like 3 questions.
Yeah, before I answer that, actually I want to emphasize on one point which is very important, that why kids go towards drugs, right?
Yeah.
Other than the peer pressure. Even if they are going because of the peer pressure, why the peers were doing drugs in the first place.
Yeah.
So actually what happens, the parents usually, they are divided into 2 categories. Like one category is like parents, they expect a lot from the children. They put a lot of pressure on them to get straight A's and to perform very well in all the aspects of life, without teaching them the exactive skills that are required to maintain their emotional state and their well-being. So what happens as a result, they are under a lot of stress and under a lot of pressure, and then they go towards drug as a remedy. They use drugs as a remedy to numb their mental state, to ease their mental pain that is caused by the false expectations set by the parents.
Okay.
That is one factor. The second factor that you talked about, which is also very important, how can we predict predicting the kids, like who will go to drugs, who have the potential to use drugs and who don't have the potential to use drugs. Those kids could be predicted through their habits. For example, if a kid is very reactive, he reacts to the situation. And the second thing, if he is very impulsive, he does things without having the consequences in the mind, and his priorities are not set, he is stuck in the thick of thin things and he is ignoring the most important things in his life. He doesn't have a good work memory, he doesn't listen, he speaks more, he doesn't have that empathy in him, and he believes in solo flights, he doesn't believe in teamwork. These are the habitual patterns, these are the neural pathways that may lead into the drug use in future.
Okay, interesting. But I feel like over here we're all guilty of not listening. Like in Pakistan, we all like to talk, before the person's even finished that point, we're already thinking of our reply. And I feel like maybe that's what's happening with the parents, with the whole kind of, I'm older than you, because we have the traditional and the cultural element regarding this. So now I want to talk about the pressures that the kids are facing. So also, I don't want to blame the parents as well, because we have a lot of parents watching, and they're trying to make the best of the environment that they know that their child will have to then work in. And grades matter here, extracurricular activities are less important. It is about getting 100% in your exams. I mean, that's for me, like, I mean, if you get 70 in England, it was just like, okay, wow, we did really well. Like, so, this little kind of encouragement is offered, maybe not at the level it should be. What would you say about the parents? Because I don't want to blame them, they're also got one hand tied behind their back.
Yeah, they're also fighting their own battles.
Yeah, so how do we offer them advice?
It's about, I think it's what you just rightly said, and what Fazal just said, I'll just reiterate that. It's about social conditioning. It's about the expectations from parents. So expectations don't start from parents. They are actually they've started way beyond them. So it's like, say, the neighbor's daughter or son has like 100% every year, and so that need to keeping up with Joneses, that concept.
Yes, okay.
So it's like, if she's got 100, you need to have 101 or something. So it's like this competition, and it's as I would go back, because as you know, my work is around self-awareness. It's about understanding where the parents needs to exceed the expectations for the children come from. And what me and Fazal discuss quite openly is that parents live their own dreams through their children.
Yes.
So if the child is not capable or is in tune with something different to do with their life, and they are expected to live their parents' dreams, then it's like what Einstein said: if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its life thinking it's stupid.
Yes,
You know,
a very good point. Yes.
So that's what's happening now. So when parents look inside, they start knowing who they are. They will stop putting these conditions on children. So it's not like, oh, I'm a parent, I know all, and, you know, I was born with this, you know, innate ability to become the world's best parent. Step back, you know, role reverse, listen to your children, listen to what they want in life, and then put your dreams in your life, not on their shoulders. I think that's what's happening a lot of the time.
Welcome back, everyone, and for everyone that's joined us today, we are looking at addiction and the difference between substance abuse and habits. What are the preventative measures? What are the treatments out there? And the role of, obviously, the family and the community. So just before the break, we were in discussion with Fazal Wahid and Misbah Khan, the both psychologists working on self-awareness and addiction and lots of multiple things, but, you know, all to do with psychology and looking at the ills within society and trying to rectify them. Now, before we move on, you wanted to add another element regarding parenting, which you feel is very vital. So let's talk about that.
Like you said earlier, that we cannot blame the parents, because parents,
sometimes we can. Like sometimes you can't.
Yeah, actually, with good intention, they mishandle their children, which results in a very bad consequences. I'll give you an example of this. Like, with a story, I'll try to explain it. A man came across a butterfly's cocoon, and fascinated, he stopped to watch. He stopped as the butterfly tried to struggle and free itself. Several hours later, it appeared as the butterflies could not free itself, and it was unable to move. Distressed by what he saw, he decided to help.
Oh no, okay. Oh gosh, I'm not liking where this analogy is going. Yes.
He tried to help. So what he did, he took a pair of scissors and snipped away with the cocoon.
Okay.
Consequently, the butterfly was free effortlessly. So now the body was swollen and small, its wings were shriveled, and it couldn't fly. So he waited for the butterfly to fly, but it couldn't. Unknown to the man, he actually disturbed the natural struggles of the butterfly, which forces the fluids from the body into the wings and make it able to fly. So
human beings, that's made me sad now. I feel bad for that butterfly, but no, okay, wonderful example.
Yeah, so that's what actually happens. Sometimes struggles is the only thing that we need in our life, and if the parents actually protect us from that struggle, it cripples us.
Okay.
So in similar cases, like for example with drug addiction, the bad consequences are there, but usually the family or the parents, they take the bad consequences, and consequently the children, they make addiction comfortable for the children.
Okay, and that's a very good point actually, because like you said, it is done with the best of intentions and, you know, kind of trying to shield your kid, but you need experience in order to how to you know, deal with situations, and that's a wonderful example. But the thing is now, what I don't want to generalize, but you know, these are just examples of, you know, just discussing, is that even if the parent has done that, you know, they've protected the child, they shielded them, you know, best education that they, you know, can possibly provide, and then they grow up and then they're like, oh no, I failed. You know, they find out that child is an addict or they're having some form of, you know, problem which has a lot of stigma attached to it. then that whole guilt and, you know, like, oh, I failed, and oh God, what is everyone gonna say? And you know, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be over dramatic, but we know what
Yeah.
like the reaction is.
Yeah.
That is also stress for the individual who's the addict. You know,
Yes.
they also don't want to put their parents or their elder through that pain or social shame. So then they keep it secret or pretend they're okay and
Yeah.
happy, which leads to other psychological mental health
Yeah.
issues. How are we supposed to deal with that? Because even if you want to tell your parents the truth, they're not able to handle it.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going back on the same. It's the lack of awareness and the lack of understanding. I think that's what the word is. That the knowledge that our children.
No,
are
but even if you look at the one that it's not, I don't want to keep saying about the lack of understanding, because there are parents out there who have experience, you know, who've lived and they've traveled, they understand, you know, they've seen maybe their cousins or their children.
But
so why?
it's different when it comes to your child.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
you could say my example. You see, I cannot have a session with my daughter or my son because surgeons cannot operate on their friends or their family.
Exactly.
So we, as parents or loved or people who care for someone, we are triggered. We get triggered by the need to protect. That is our most human core behavior, to protect our children. And what you just said is self-judgment. It's like, you know, have I failed? Wasn't I there for them? You know, what did I? So it's all the guilt, you know, self-blame and guilt that comes with it. And the reason I use the word understanding or lack of awareness is, yes, the parents might know about this issue, but do they actually know what is causing their triggers? Do they actually know what's causing their uncomfortableness around their child's behavior? And that is where open dialogue and communication comes in. Understanding that the young person in today's world is actually exposed to much more dangerous, more toxic influences than probably me and Fazal were in, you know, when we were younger. So it's about the acceptance of what is actually being consumed by the child or the young person, and knowing that it might affect them. So I think we, as parents or as society, we are very afraid of what you just said. You know, in Urdu is the best way to use it. Loke kahenge, you know, and it's like the ostrich syndrome. You know, if I put my head in the sand, nothing's gonna. You know, if I don't see it, it's not happening. So it's opening our eyes to the uncomfortableness that is surrounding the parent. I'm talking about parents, and knowing that, okay, if my child has been influenced and they have been affected by this substance or any other addictive behavior, what can I do about it? The solution needs to be there, not the all-consuming guilt.
Okay, Fazal.
Yeah, actually we need to understand one concept. The skills that my parents used to raise me cannot be used by me to raise my children, because there is a gap of 50 years almost, okay? And the second thing, parent is a reflected role. When a child is born, with that a parent is born, okay? So if we say they are experienced, they are not experienced at all. They may be very experienced in other life skills, in some survival skills, but not as a parent. Parenting is a skill that needs to be learned, okay? But we, in Pakistan specifically, we don't find it worth learning. If you ask someone, you're going to become a parent, did you go for counseling, for like parenting counseling? They laugh at you. Why should I go for that? Did my father like seek counseling to raise me?
Yes, there's always this comparison. It becomes a competition.
Exactly. Like you cannot replay the parent role. Those things are obsoleted now. Second thing, we don't need to force feed the children. We don't need to teach them. We need to synchronize the learning moments with the teaching moments. The learning moments are actually the teaching moments. So we should not force feed them. And the second thing, they don't need our knowledge. It is from another time, you know. We just need to give them an environment which is nourishing, where there is love and respect. And the second main responsibility of a parent is to protect them from the bad influence on the street, including their own influence, which is also very bad. Okay. So that is the main responsibility of a parent. When you do these two responsibilities, when you fulfill these two responsibilities, you give an opportunity to a child to grow. to learn, to nurture.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Excellent.
So that
A dream, and that is very interesting. And you know, it shook me to my core when I watched it, because you, with the actors that are in it, Jennifer Connelly, and then you know Jared Leto, you don't, and I think it was Damon Wayans as well. You don't really expect it to go there, but you definitely do check it out. But now, it's not just substance abuse that we're looking. Let's step aside from that, because that is obviously the most common one. But there are other forms of addiction that you can get addicted to anything, correct? Okay, so I'll start with Fazal and then I'll move on to you, Miss. But what are the other, we've got social media addiction now, which is actually becoming
exactly
a thing.
screen addiction. Yeah.
What other addictions are out there?
There are chemical addictions, but there are non-chemical addictions as well, like compulsive gambling is an addiction, screen addiction, pornography, and there are many addictions that are non-chemical, but actually the activity in the brain is similar. Like to the brain, it is the same activity actually. Whatever you are addicted to basically disrupts the neurotransmitters that is called dopamine and serotonin. So the effects and the outcomes, they are the same. And whenever the harms outweigh the benefits, whether it's like eating, it's reading, it's even getting degrees, and it's like social media or whatever the activity is, if harms outweigh the benefits, it comes under the umbrella of addiction.
Okay, interesting. And so, Misbah, when we have your people coming in to see you, are we seeing a rise in these other addictions as well?
Yes, social media, pornography, as Fazal just said, screen time. It's all happening. There's a growth. As I said, we become a society of consumerism, and I just don't use the word consumerism in the material sense of the word. I also use it in the sense of the information that we are consuming, and it's about just filling our time with things which just make us happy. In that moment, it's like a
momentary happiness.
Momentary, it's like, you know, having a like or a heart or whatever on social media gives us that boost, that, you know, that jump in like
it's
heart.
so crazy actually, because when you
is.
break it down and you reflect, like, wait, it is that I am
It
feeling
is,
that
that ping.
Yes.
You know, it's like the Pavlov's salivating dogs experiment. You know, whenever there was a bell, they used to salivate, and it's that reward mechanism in our brain doesn't recognize that, you know, this is actually not something that we are, or the person is taking on physically, but they are taking on mentally, if that makes sense.
Yes,
their behavior. And it's all the same. The brain does not differentiate between a physical addiction and a mental addiction. So, and because it's like, I'll use a word, it's more acceptable in society to be on your phone all day and, you know, liking and commenting and, you know, and pinging and ponging and poking, it's okay. You know, you could be sitting amongst friends and you could be doing it. You know, you'd be on a phone. I mean, the amount of times I've seen couples in restaurants on their phones with no eye contact and no relatability. And because that person is, if that person was taking a joint or you know, smoking cannabis, they'll be like, oh, go out, please go out. You know, you're not allowed to do this.
You can get arrested.
But with the phone, it's like, okay. And it's being I think the word transferred into younger children. You see restaurants, children with YouTube open up on their phone and just constantly just consuming information. And it's unfortunately it's not being recognized in that sense.
Okay, but I mean, it's not at the speed at which we'd like to, because slowly you're seeing the research coming out from, you know, in psychology, you know, associations across the pond as well, like, you know, from England and America. So, you know, there is actually now science slowly getting behind it. Now, when we see these socially negative elements creeping into the norm, how are we supposed to fight it? Because everyone's doing it. So how are parents supposed to contend with that? Like, it's a bad habit. You know, you shouldn't be on your phone at dinner time. You know, you shouldn't be on your phone when you're sitting opposite someone, yet everyone's doing it. So what are the solutions out there? And for everyone that's joined us, you know, maybe you're hearing negative conversation, but we're also offering solutions as we go along. So it is actually quite a light and positive outcome, I feel. So Fazal, I'll start with you.
Actually, The solution to this problem is that the parents need to learn communication skills. They
I
need
feel
to
like
connect.
we're really blaming parents a lot. Like,
They
we're
need
not
to
trying
connect.
to blame your parents, guys.
They need to connect with the children on a molecular level. You know,
Yes.
actually, this gap, this communication gap, actually gives birth to such kind of behaviors that are not healthy. And with the passage of time, they get addicted to it. Like Misbah mentioned earlier, there is a pleasure center in our brain. Which is active when we do healthy activities like we eat, we love, or we do something that we enjoy. This pleasure center is hijacked by the substances and these non-chemical addictions. Okay. So these things become more important than those healthy things.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah. Okay.
So we need to replace these bad behavior. What happens actually, there is a role of the family, there's a role of the children itself actually, and they need to recognize those roles and play those roles in order to come out of. So the first thing they should do, that they need to discipline. They need to create a disciplined environment at home while maintaining respect and love. Okay. Love and respect, this is unconditional. Now there are skills that if you utilize and learn and utilize those skills, you can discipline your children without conditioning respect and love for them. So we need to learn those skills. Tough love, we need to learn tough love. We need to learn communication skills like crucial conversations where the opinion is different and stakes are high and emotions are strong. How to communicate in those moments, because biologically we are not designed for those things. Biologically we are designed for fight and flight.
Yes.
Okay, because we used to live in forest and we had to interact with animals.
Yeah.
So these were the two options that we had to adopt. Like either we had to fight or we had to run away, flight. So biologically we are designed for those two things. We are not designed biologically for crucial conversation. That is a skill that we need to learn, and that is a learnable skill. So if the parents or the family or whoever the caregiver is, if they learn those skills, they can communicate with their kids.
Wonderful, that's great. And actually now what we're going to do is, because I've noticed that the time is running short, the clock is there, that's why I look there, but we are now going to look at the solutions and you know, the treatments out there, and you know, I'm going to set it out now because I want you guys to fill in all of that, because I want to make sure we cover everything. So I'd like you to tell us about the treatments that are available, and then also, you know, if parents are to send their children to rehab centers within Pakistan, what are the services out there, what are the resources, how do they make sure that they're protecting their child rather than actually getting them more traumatized? Because there are so many films out there, actually now remembering them, that, you know, quite traumatic things can happen if there's no, you know, accountability. So I'll start with Fazal and move on to Misbah. So tell us about the treatments out there, and then we'll talk about the rehab center.
There are three types.
Don't do all of them because you have to leave some for Misbah as well.
Okay. There are three types of treatment available, three types of options available for the people. One is called, we call it indirect treatment, like the family is not the patient, the families come to the treatment. We teach them, we counsel them, we teach them the skills to handle their addict, their patient. We actually convert the family into makeshift counselors. So in that case, we don't even see the patients. We train the family, and the family goes back home and they handle their patients and he gets well. That is called indirect treatment.
Wonderful.
And then there is another option that is called outdoor treatment, where admission of the patient is not mandatory. The family comes for the counseling and we teach them family interventions. With the help of intervention, they raise the bottom. They raise the bottom so the patients don't have to realize when he hits the bottom, because the price tag is very high. So what we do, we train the family on the family intervention, and they intervene in the patient's lives, and he becomes willing to come for the counseling and treatment. So he comes for the counseling on outdoor basis and he gets well, he gets rid of addiction. And then there is the third type that we call it indoor treatment, wherein we take the patient in-house, we treat him on a proper model, 12 steps treatment program. And with that, the family also comes for the counseling on outdoor basis. So we work in a triangular, like the professionals, the patient, and the family.
Wonderful.
And this is how we get rid of addiction.
Okay, wonderful. And so what are the resources available out there for people? Are there enough? Is there enough treatment out there for people who can offer the treatment?
There is not enough. There's a huge lack I'm not sure about the ratio. Fazal might be able to give me a proper, give us a ratio, but there's a huge discrepancy between the need and the supply. So the demand is high, but the supply is low. Even if the supply was high, the quality of professionals, the quality of care, the quality of the intervention and the treatment is very substandard.
Right.
It's actually sometimes it's actually the right word would be horrendous.
Yes.
They lock the patients up, they chain them to the bed. There's a sense of imprisonment. And
that might be one of the reasons why they took up substances in the first place, because they're feeling trapped.
Yes, exactly. So it's like enforcing the trauma, which they, as you quite rightly said, which might have been the trigger for them to seek addiction. And when they go into treatment, they have been re-triggered. So it's like a vicious circle. So there is definitely a lack of quality, treatment interventions. Definitely, right. There's a huge lack. Okay. And as I quite rightly said before, awareness and best practice policies are not being implemented in Pakistan at this moment.
Okay, sorry, I know we've run out of time, but just quickly, how can parents make sure that they make the center or the service is up to scratch and, at international level?
Actually, one thing I would quickly add on to what Ms. Bas said. Actually, like I mentioned earlier, there are almost 10 million people using drugs, and according to ANF, only 30,000 people have access towards treatment, which is 0.3% of the people who are using drugs. So it's like the treatment options are very less. And even out of the treatment options that are available, like Ms. Ba mentioned, there are many treatment centers who do not follow proper treatment protocols and proper treatment models. So as a result, the relapse ratio is very high.
Okay, so we need to look into that, and we will call you back for this because there's a lot more still we need to discuss. But thank you so much. It's actually been a really great conversation. And we got so much new information. I was very scared. I was giving Fazal a hard time before the show. I was like, we need new stuff. I've done this topic too many times, but it was a wonderful show with a lot of practical information for you and advice that you guys could implement. And if you would like to connect with any of our guests regarding this topic, please do write to us on our Facebook fan page, which is with the name of World This Morning, our Twitter page, World This Morning without a G, our Daily Motion and YouTube page, World This Morning. The repeat is at 11:05 p.m. Now, one element we didn't touch upon was the psychological, extreme that people can be pushed to within addiction. Depression, anxiety, all these things can also be triggers, and people can also, end up taking their lives or dying from substance abuse. So try to be kind, show some empathy, and do reach out to the professionals to help someone if you know someone is suffering. With that, I will see you bright and early very soon. I hope you have a wonderful day. See you guys very soon. Bye-bye.